Have you ever felt that unsettling sensation, like someone's flashing a smile in front of you while quietly scheming behind your back? It's a strange but real experience, one that many people have encountered in their lives. We're often told to trust those around us, especially the ones who seem warm and friendly. Yet there's a dark side to that kindness, a side where manipulation hides in plain sight. Just a quick reminder, if you're enjoying the content or find it helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. It's the best way to stay updated and support the channel. Now, let's get started. Manipulators are cunning. They don't wear signs around their necks announcing their intentions. Instead, they hide in plain sight, cloaking themselves in charm and generosity. These people don't want your affection or genuine connection. They want your trust, your thoughts, your energy, everything that makes you vulnerable. They watch, they listen, and they study your every move, not because they admire you, but because they want to use your weaknesses to their advantage. This is where Stoicism comes into play. The ancient Stoics, philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, recognized the need to develop an unwavering sense of self-control and emotional resilience. While we may not call it manipulation today, they understood that human nature has always contained the seeds of exploitation, and they offered a way out by cultivating emotional intelligence and resisting the urge to be swayed by external forces. Let's look at how this applies in our lives today. Manipulators often understand that our emotions are the key to getting what they want. Whether it's flattering words, subtle criticism, or even pretend concern, they prey on our vulnerabilities. Think about how often you've been flattered, even with the best intentions, only to later realize you were being controlled in some way. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The closer someone pretends to be, the more cautious you should become." The Stoics believed that people who pretend to be close to us, who push to learn more about our fears, our desires, and our insecurities, are often the ones who need to be kept at arm's length. They're not seeking connection, they're seeking control. Now, what does this mean for you? How do you protect yourself from these hidden threats? It starts with recognizing your own fears and emotional weaknesses, understanding them, acknowledging them, and most importantly, guarding them. Because the more you reveal to others, the easier it is for someone to exploit them. And that's exactly what a manipulator wants to do, get you to reveal too much, so they can use it to their advantage. We've all been there. You might be having a conversation with someone who's pretending to be your friend, and suddenly they hit you with something subtle, something that taps into your fears. Maybe it's a well-meaning friend saying, "Are you sure you want to go for that promotion? Last time you tried, it didn't turn out well, right?" They act like they're helping, but their words are designed to freeze you in place, to make you doubt yourself. This is where Stoic philosophy offers us a critical tool: emotional discipline. The Stoics didn't ignore their emotions, they learned to control them. They understood that if you allowed every emotion to guide your decisions, you would be led astray. Instead, they practiced self-reflection and emotional restraint, which is what we need to do when confronted by manipulative behavior. It's easy to react when someone tries to push your buttons, but the Stoic response is to pause, reflect, and choose not to let those external pressures dictate your emotional state. By doing so, you take away the manipulator's power. When you're able to detach from your fears and insecurities, you become unreadable, untouchable, and that's when the manipulator loses their ability to influence you. So, what does this mean for you practically? It means taking a step back before you share anything personal. It means asking yourself, why am I sharing this? Is this going to help me grow, or am I just giving away a piece of myself? The Stoics were strategic in what they revealed to others. They didn't hide their emotions because they were afraid of them, they controlled them out of strength and wisdom. In the next section, we'll explore how to apply these Stoic principles to your daily life, turning your self-awareness into your greatest weapon. When we talk about emotional resilience, we're not suggesting you suppress your feelings or bottle everything up inside. That's not what Stoicism advocates. Instead, it's about understanding your emotions deeply and learning how to respond to them, not to react mindlessly. Imagine you're in a situation where a colleague tries to undermine you subtly. Perhaps they take credit for your idea or belittle your efforts in front of others. Most people would feel anger or frustration rise up within them. It's a natural response. But here's where the Stoic principle comes in. Rather than reacting with anger or seeking revenge, the Stoic would pause and think, what's the bigger picture here? What's really at stake? By choosing to respond instead of reacting, you regain control. You refuse to be at the mercy of someone else's actions or words. This is a powerful tool in your personal and professional life, especially when dealing with manipulators. The more you practice this, the more it becomes second nature. Instead of being pulled into petty conflicts, you're able to detach emotionally and think strategically. You're able to maintain your inner peace while still making the right choices. Now you might be thinking, that sounds great in theory, but how can I actually put this into practice? That's where daily reflection comes in. In his writings, Epictetus emphasized the importance of self-examination. He said, it's not things that upset us, but our opinions about things. This is key. It's not the events themselves that cause us pain, it's how we interpret them. When we interpret a situation through the lens of fear or anger, it escalates. But when we choose to see it as an opportunity for growth or a challenge to overcome, we take back our power. Here's an exercise you can try. At the end of each day, take 5 minutes to reflect on the events that triggered you. Ask yourself, why did I react that way? Was it because of my own insecurities? Was there something I could have done differently? This practice of self-reflection helps you catch those emotional triggers before they control you. Real-life examples of this can be powerful. Take the story of Alex, a young professional who was consistently overlooked by his boss. Alex had poured his heart and soul into his work, only to see others take credit for his efforts. Naturally, he was frustrated and angry, but instead of reacting in the moment, Alex chose to take a step back and reflect. He realized that his anger wasn't helping him, it was clouding his judgment. By detaching emotionally, Alex began to focus on what he could control: his performance, his communication, and his attitude. Over time, this shift in mindset allowed Alex to rise above the drama. His boss took notice of his calm, collected demeanor, and Alex eventually earned the respect he deserved. His story is a perfect example of how emotional resilience can not only protect you from manipulation, but can also propel you towards success. Now let's talk about another Stoic principle that can be incredibly helpful when dealing with manipulators: keeping your judgment to yourself. In the modern world, we're bombarded by information, news, social media, conversations. We're constantly absorbing data, and much of it is skewed or influenced by others. The Stoics understood that it's easy to fall into the trap of believing what others say without question. But here's the thing, you cannot outsource your judgment. Epictetus once said, if someone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned only these. This is a powerful reminder that our perception of reality can be easily manipulated by others, especially those with ulterior motives. Think about how often we trust the opinions of others without examining them critically. Whether it's a rumor about a colleague or a negative comment on social media, many of us instinctively take it at face value. But the Stoic approach is to pause and question, where is this information coming from? What does this person gain by sharing this with me? Take the case of Linda, a woman who worked in a competitive corporate environment. She had a colleague named Greg who seemed genuinely friendly and supportive. However, Linda soon realized that Greg was feeding her selective information about her other co-workers. He would tell Linda things like, "Oh, did you hear what Sarah said about you in the meeting?" Or, "I don't think Mark respects you." At first, Linda was hurt and defensive, but over time she realized that Greg was trying to manipulate her perception of her co-workers, to isolate her. He was planting seeds of doubt to gain control over her. The Stoic mindset helped Linda avoid falling into Greg's trap. She began to question the validity of his words and how they fit into her larger understanding of reality. She realized that Greg's intention was not to inform, but to manipulate. By keeping her judgment independent of his influence, Linda was able to protect herself and maintain her clarity of thought. This is why slow belief is so important. The Stoics didn't rush to conclusions or take things at face value. They questioned everything. And that's something we can apply today. Before you accept any information, take a moment to evaluate it. Is it true? What do they gain by sharing this with you? Are you being manipulated into believing something without questioning it? It's not about being paranoid or suspicious, but about being thoughtful and deliberate in your judgments. This practice of slow belief will protect you from manipulators who thrive on rushing you into decisions, especially when you're emotionally vulnerable. Let's pause for a moment and reflect on this principle. How often do you find yourself believing something without questioning it? Whether it's a comment from a friend, a headline you read online, or an emotional reaction to a situation, how often do you stop and ask, is this truly the whole story? Developing this habit of questioning the information you receive is one of the most powerful ways to protect yourself from manipulation. Now that we've explored the Stoic principles of emotional control and judgment, let's delve into another powerful tool that Stoicism offers when dealing with manipulators: strategic silence. In a world where we are constantly encouraged to speak out, share our feelings, and express ourselves, silence may seem counterintuitive. However, Stoics understood that silence isn't about withdrawing or being passive. It's a deliberate choice to protect your peace and maintain control over your narrative. Consider this. Have you ever been in a conversation where you felt pressured to explain yourself, defend your actions, or justify your decisions? Maybe it was a friend, a family member, or a colleague who demanded an explanation for something you did. In these moments, silence can be a powerful response. Instead of feeling the need to justify your actions or explain yourself, the Stoic response is to remain calm and collected, offering no unnecessary explanation. The more you speak, the more ammunition you give someone to twist your words. When you withhold your response, especially when someone is trying to provoke a reaction from you, you take away their power. Think of how often manipulators try to provoke emotional reactions by pushing buttons. They ask questions that are designed to make you feel defensive or guilty. They use your vulnerabilities against you, but when you choose to remain silent, you create a sense of mystery and control. You make it clear that your thoughts, emotions, and decisions are not up for debate or manipulation. There's a story about a young woman named Emma who was constantly pressured by her boss to take on additional tasks outside of her job description. At first, Emma tried to explain why she couldn't take on more work. She was already overwhelmed. But her boss wasn't satisfied with that answer. He would push her further, trying to make her feel guilty for not being a team player. One day, instead of responding, Emma chose silence. When her boss tried to guilt-trip her again, she simply gave a calm, non-reactive response. "I'm doing my best with the tasks I've been assigned. If you need additional help, I'm happy to discuss it with the team." This was a shift in power. By not getting defensive, Emma took control of the situation. Over time, her boss stopped pushing her, respecting her boundaries. Silence, when practiced strategically, isn't about being passive or fearful. It's about choosing when and how to engage with others. It allows you to maintain your composure, assess the situation, and decide whether or not a response is necessary. Now let's talk about another critical aspect of Stoic philosophy, self-sufficiency. The Stoics believed that true strength comes from within, not from external validation or approval. In a world where social media constantly feeds us the need for external validation, it's easy to forget the power of self-sufficiency. A manipulator thrives on your dependence on their approval. If they can make you feel like you need them, whether it's for affirmation, attention, or validation, they can control you. But when you learn to rely on your own sense of worth, your own inner strength, you become less vulnerable to manipulation. Self-sufficiency doesn't mean isolating yourself or becoming indifferent to others. It means that your sense of worth isn't dependent on someone else's opinion of you. The Stoics understood this deeply. They weren't antisocial or emotionally distant, they simply didn't let external factors dictate their internal state. There's a powerful lesson from the life of the philosopher Socrates. He was known for his ability to remain calm and composed, no matter the situation. He didn't seek external validation. Instead, he relied on his own reasoning and inner wisdom. When people criticized him, he didn't react defensively or try to explain himself. He simply continued to live by his principles, knowing that the opinions of others did not define his worth. In modern life, this idea of self-sufficiency can be seen in the way we manage our relationships and work environments. It's about not allowing others to dictate your happiness, your worth, or your choices. It's about building your self-esteem from within, so that no one can manipulate you by controlling your emotions or decisions. For example, consider a person who is constantly seeking approval from others, whether it's their friends, their colleagues, or their partner. This constant need for validation can lead to a sense of insecurity. A manipulator, knowing this, might exploit this need by offering praise, affection, or attention to control the person. However, if the individual learns to validate themselves, they become less susceptible to this type of manipulation. This is where Stoic self-sufficiency comes in. It's about developing the confidence to make decisions based on your own values and principles, not based on what others expect from you. To put this into practice, start by setting personal boundaries. Recognize when you're seeking validation from others and ask yourself why. Are you truly seeking affirmation, or is there an underlying fear of rejection or judgment? Once you identify the root cause of your need for external approval, you can begin to shift your focus back to your own self-worth. Practice self-affirmation. Remind yourself that you don't need others' approval to be valuable or worthy. This practice of self-sufficiency will help you become more resilient and less vulnerable to manipulation. Now let's explore another aspect of Stoicism, the importance of perspective. The Stoics believed that our perception of events is often more significant than the events themselves. They understood that our mind shapes the way we experience the world, and by changing our perspective, we can change how we feel and react. This is particularly relevant when dealing with manipulators. They may try to distort your perception of reality, making you question your own thoughts, feelings, and decisions. By shifting your perspective, you can see through their tactics and maintain clarity. One powerful Stoic practice is to reflect on the impermanence of life. When we remind ourselves that everything is temporary, it becomes easier to let go of anger, resentment, or frustration. We realize that no moment, no person, no situation is permanent. This helps us maintain a sense of detachment and focus on what truly matters, our own peace of mind and inner strength. A great example of this comes from the life of the Stoic philosopher Seneca. Despite being exiled by Emperor Nero, Seneca remained composed and focused on his inner peace. He didn't allow external events, no matter how challenging, to disturb his tranquility. Instead, he focused on the things he could control: his thoughts, his reactions, and his attitude. By changing your perspective, you can distance yourself from the manipulations of others. When someone tries to distort your reality, you can remind yourself that their tactics are temporary and you have the power to maintain your own peace. Let's talk about something critical when navigating the complex dynamics of human relationships: the importance of maintaining your integrity. This is a concept that the Stoics valued deeply. They understood that no matter what external forces may be at play, the most important thing is to stay true to your values. Your integrity is the foundation of your inner strength, and manipulators will always try to undermine it. But if you remain grounded in your principles, nothing and no one can shake you. Manipulators are often incredibly skilled at identifying your weaknesses and using them to influence you. They might try to make you feel guilty, ashamed, or insecure. But what they're really after is your moral compass. When you allow them to erode your sense of right and wrong, they've won. However, by consistently choosing to act in accordance with your values, regardless of external pressures, you become unshakable. It's important to remember that your values and your integrity are not negotiable. They are the non-negotiable foundation upon which your life is built. You don't compromise on them to please others, and you don't abandon them for convenience. Stoicism teaches us that while we cannot control the actions of others, we can always control our own choices. Take the example of Sarah, a woman who was deeply committed to her work ethic and honesty. She had been working at a law firm for several years, and one day a senior partner asked her to bend the rules on a case. He suggested that she adjust some of the details to make the client's case look stronger than it actually was. At first, Sarah hesitated. The partner was highly respected and the pressure was intense. However, Sarah's commitment to her integrity won out. She politely declined and explained that she couldn't compromise her professional values. This wasn't an easy decision, and it could have cost her a promotion. But by staying true to her principles, Sarah earned the respect of her colleagues, and over time, she became known for her unwavering commitment to integrity. Her career flourished because people knew they could trust her, and her sense of self-respect grew stronger. In this situation, Sarah could have easily fallen into the trap of manipulation. After all, it's often difficult to say no to those in positions of power, but by staying true to her values, she protected her integrity, and that's what gave her the strength to thrive in a challenging environment. So how do you maintain your integrity in a world full of temptation and manipulation? It begins with clarity about what you stand for. It's about setting clear boundaries and understanding that you don't have to explain yourself to anyone who pressures you to compromise your values. When you make decisions, always ask yourself, does this align with my core principles? If it doesn't, then it's time to walk away. Another tool the Stoics use to maintain integrity is self-reflection. They spend time each day reflecting on their actions, thoughts, and decisions, ensuring that they align with their personal values. This practice helps to strengthen their sense of integrity and provides clarity in moments of uncertainty. A great example of this comes from the life of the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. Despite being the emperor of Rome, Marcus lived according to a strict code of conduct. He didn't allow his position of power to corrupt his integrity. Every night, he would reflect on his actions and ask himself whether he had lived in accordance with his values. This practice of self-reflection kept him grounded and focused, no matter the challenges he faced. You can adopt this practice in your own life by setting aside time each day to reflect on your actions. Think about the choices you made, how they aligned with your principles, and whether you stayed true to yourself. If you find any inconsistencies, it's an opportunity to course correct and do better tomorrow. Now let's shift gears and talk about boundaries. This is an area where Stoicism really shines, especially in relation to manipulators. The Stoics believed that in order to live a virtuous life, you must know where to draw the line and protect your time, energy, and resources. In a world that constantly demands more from us, setting boundaries is essential. Manipulators thrive on your inability to say no. They push and prod until you're worn down, taking advantage of your kindness or your reluctance to disappoint others. but boundaries are your first line of defense. When you set clear boundaries, you're not being selfish, you're being wise. You're protecting your peace and ensuring that you have the emotional energy to pursue the things that matter most to you. The Stoics understood that time and energy are finite resources, and they made sure to spend them wisely. They didn't allow others to dictate how they would use their time, and neither should you. Take the story of Jason, a man who worked in a high-pressure job and constantly found himself overwhelmed by the demands of his colleagues. They would ask him to take on extra tasks, attend last-minute meetings, or stay late to finish projects. At first, Jason tried to be accommodating, but over time, he began to feel drained and stressed. His work performance suffered, and his personal life was being affected. Eventually, Jason decided to set boundaries. He started saying no to unnecessary meetings and tasks that didn't align with his priorities. He communicated clearly with his colleagues about his availability, and he made sure to reserve time for his personal well-being. It wasn't easy at first, but over time, his colleagues respected his boundaries, and Jason regained control of his time and energy. This is the power of boundaries. By setting clear limits, you take control of your life and protect yourself from being manipulated by others' demands. So, how can you apply this in your own life? Start by identifying areas where you feel drained or overwhelmed. Are there people in your life who regularly demand your time or energy? Are there situations where you feel obligated to say yes, even though it's not in your best interest? Once you identify these areas, start setting clear boundaries. It's okay to say no, it's okay to prioritize yourself. Remember, setting boundaries is not about being rude or unkind. It's about protecting your peace and making sure that you can show up as the best version of yourself. The Stoics knew that without clear boundaries, they would be vulnerable to manipulation and distraction. You can do the same. Let's talk about something that many of us tend to ignore when faced with challenges: the power of patience. This is another critical Stoic principle, and it's one that plays a massive role when you're up against manipulators or anyone trying to sway your decisions. In today's fast-paced world, where instant gratification is the norm, patience is often seen as a weakness. But the Stoics understood that patience is one of the greatest strengths you can develop, especially when it comes to managing difficult situations or people. Manipulators want you to act in haste, whether it's rushing into decisions, reacting emotionally, or letting them push you into a corner. They thrive on your impatience. When you're quick to act or make impulsive choices, you give up control. But when you exercise patience, you gain clarity. You create space between stimulus and response, allowing yourself time to think and evaluate the situation calmly. Think about the last time you were in a situation where you felt rushed or pressured. Maybe it was a work deadline, a personal decision, or a conversation where someone was trying to get you to make a quick decision. In those moments, how often do you feel like you don't have the time to stop and reflect? Impatience can cloud your judgment, making you more susceptible to manipulation. But Stoicism teaches us that in those very moments of pressure, patience is the antidote. Take the example of Rachel, who found herself constantly pushed by a manipulative colleague named Thomas. Thomas would often send her urgent emails with last-minute requests, knowing that Rachel would feel guilty if she didn't comply. At first, Rachel would jump to action, trying to meet his demands immediately. But over time, she noticed that these constant demands were wearing her down. Rachel decided to implement patience as her defense mechanism. The next time Thomas sent her a rushed request, Rachel took a deep breath, paused, and replied calmly, "I'll review this tomorrow and get back to you with my thoughts." This simple pause gave Rachel the time to think and decide if the request was reasonable or if Thomas was just manipulating her into doing his work. By exercising patience, Rachel regained control of the situation. She didn't allow Thomas to dictate her actions, and over time, he stopped making unreasonable demands. Patience doesn't mean inactivity or indecision. It means taking the time to reflect before you respond. It means not allowing others to rush you into decisions or reactions. The Stoics believed that when we practice patience, we clear the mental fog that surrounds us and allow our rational minds to guide us. This leads to better decision-making and stronger boundaries. But patience isn't just about reacting to external pressures, it's also about how we manage ourselves. The Stoics understood that life is full of challenges and obstacles, and sometimes we just have to sit with discomfort. Instead of seeking immediate relief, we must learn to endure and grow from it. This is where patience becomes a tool for personal development. There's a famous story about the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who, despite being the most powerful man in the world, faced constant challenges from within and outside the empire. Instead of reacting impulsively to every crisis, Marcus would often withdraw to reflect, allowing the dust to settle before making decisions. His patience allowed him to govern wisely without being swayed by emotions or pressures. This lesson in patience is one that we can all apply in our daily lives. When you face difficulties, whether they're personal, professional, or emotional, taking a moment to pause and reflect can help you respond in a way that aligns with your Stoic values. By exercising patience, you strengthen your ability to resist manipulation and avoid hasty decisions that you might regret later. Now let's look at self-reliance from a different angle. While self-sufficiency is about being able to stand on your own and not relying on others for validation, self-reliance also means knowing when to ask for help and being aware of the sources of support in your life. The Stoics weren't isolated hermits. They understood the importance of community and support. But they also knew that the foundation of their strength had to come from within. Many manipulators prey on people who have a hard time asking for help or relying on their own judgment. They know that people who don't trust themselves or their own abilities are much easier to control. On the flip side, when you develop self-reliance, you not only become less vulnerable to manipulation, but you also empower yourself to take ownership of your decisions and actions. Self-reliance isn't just about being independent, it's about being interdependent in a healthy way. It's knowing that you can seek support when needed, but also that you can handle life's challenges without falling into the trap of depending on someone else's influence. It's about knowing your own worth and capabilities and not letting anyone make you feel small or inferior. A great example of this principle comes from the story of Luke, a young man who always struggled with asking for help. He believed that he had to do everything on his own, especially at work, and that asking for assistance was a sign of weakness. This mindset made him vulnerable to being manipulated by his colleagues, who would take advantage of his reluctance to delegate tasks. Over time, Luke realized that his desire to appear self-sufficient was backfiring. He was exhausted, overwhelmed, and frustrated. One day, Luke decided to change his approach. He started asking for help when needed and allowed himself to rely on others when appropriate. By doing so, he not only reduced his stress but also built stronger, more genuine relationships with his colleagues. His self-reliance wasn't about isolation, it was about knowing when to lean on others and when to stand on his own. This is an important lesson. True self-reliance isn't about doing everything by yourself. It's about trusting your own judgment and abilities, while also knowing when to reach out for support. This balance is key to avoiding manipulation and maintaining control over your life. As we move forward, we'll take a closer look at how you can begin to cultivate a Stoic mindset that will help you navigate the challenges of manipulation and emotional control. This isn't just about knowing the theory, it's about putting these principles into practice in a way that transforms your life. Let's talk about something that is perhaps one of the most powerful practices you can adopt to protect yourself from manipulation: reflecting daily on your actions and thoughts. The Stoics were known for their practice of daily reflection, taking time each day to examine how they had lived, where they had succeeded, and where they had fallen short. This practice wasn't just about self-criticism, but about self-improvement. It was about aligning their daily actions with their values, ensuring that every decision they made was in line with their personal philosophy. This daily reflection is more than just a routine. It's a way of taking full responsibility for your life. When you reflect on your actions, thoughts, and emotional responses, you start to notice patterns that could either help you grow or lead you into manipulation. Recognizing these patterns helps you take proactive steps to break free from unhealthy cycles. Let me share an example from the life of Max, a mid-level manager in a large corporation. Max often found himself agreeing to requests that didn't align with his priorities or values. Whether it was taking on extra work from his boss or attending meetings that didn't really serve his role, Max kept finding himself in situations where he felt overextended and resentful. He realized that this pattern wasn't new. It had been happening for months. However, he never took the time to reflect on why he kept saying yes to things that drained his energy. One day, after a particularly exhausting week, Max decided to try something different. He spent a few minutes journaling about the week's events, his responses, and his feelings. As he wrote, he realized that he had been saying yes because he didn't want to disappoint others. He had been avoiding difficult conversations about boundaries because he feared conflict. This realization was eye-opening. By taking the time to reflect, Max saw how his lack of reflection had made him susceptible to manipulation by others who took advantage of his reluctance to assert himself. With this new awareness, Max made a conscious effort to reflect daily on his decisions, making sure that each one was made from a place of self-respect and alignment with his personal values. Over time, this practice of daily reflection helped Max reclaim his time, energy, and sense of purpose. He stopped letting others manipulate him and started living in a way that felt authentic to who he was. Daily reflection is powerful because it allows you to be intentional with your actions. It ensures that you're not living on autopilot, but actively engaging with the choices you make. When you take time each day to check in with yourself, you begin to recognize when you're being manipulated, whether it's by someone else or by your own internal fears and insecurities. A simple way to start this practice is to set aside a few minutes each evening to ask yourself a few key questions. What decisions did I make today, and why? Where did I feel pressured or manipulated? How did I react to challenges, and was it aligned with my values? What did I learn about myself today? By answering these questions, you'll start to uncover patterns in your behavior, thoughts, and emotional responses. This self-awareness is the foundation for cultivating emotional intelligence and resilience. When you know yourself better, you are far less likely to be manipulated by others and more likely to make decisions that serve your long-term goals. In addition to reflection, another essential Stoic practice for developing resilience is practicing gratitude. It may seem counterintuitive, especially when we're talking about protection from manipulators, but gratitude is a powerful tool for cultivating inner peace and emotional strength. When you express gratitude for what you have, rather than focusing on what you don't have, you shift your perspective from scarcity to abundance. Gratitude helps you build resilience against manipulation by grounding you in what truly matters. It reminds you of your strengths, your values, and the positive aspects of your life. When you're grateful for the things you have, whether it's your health, your relationships, or your achievements, you stop looking for external validation. You stop being vulnerable to the manipulative tactics of those who prey on your need for approval or attention. Take the example of Lisa, who was constantly trying to impress her boss and co-workers. She would work long hours, volunteer for extra projects, and take on tasks that weren't in her job description, all in the hope of receiving praise and recognition. But despite her efforts, she never felt truly appreciated. Her colleagues, knowing her need for validation, would sometimes exploit it, pushing her to do more work with empty promises of rewards. One day, Lisa decided to change her mindset. Instead of focusing on getting validation from her boss, she began to practice gratitude. Every morning, she took 5 minutes to reflect on the things she was grateful for: her family, her health, the opportunities she had at work, and the skills she had developed. Slowly but surely, Lisa began to feel more grounded and less dependent on external validation. She stopped overextending herself at work and started making decisions based on her values, not out of a need for approval. Gratitude has a way of shifting your focus. It makes you realize that you don't need to please others in order to feel worthy. This sense of self-worth is what makes you less vulnerable to manipulation. When you are grounded in gratitude and self-respect, you are less likely to let others control your actions, thoughts, or emotions. Now let's touch on one of the most important Stoic lessons that can help you when dealing with manipulators: detachment. Detachment doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. Rather, it's the ability to observe your emotions, thoughts, and reactions without being consumed by them. It's the ability to step back from a situation and see it for what it is, rather than getting lost in the emotional drama that often surrounds it. Manipulators rely on your emotional involvement. They want you to react, to feel something, to get caught up in the drama. But when you practice detachment, you take away their power. Detachment allows you to see the situation clearly and respond thoughtfully, instead of being swept away by emotions. A great example of detachment comes from the life of the philosopher Epictetus. Despite facing hardships, including being a slave for much of his life, Epictetus was able to detach himself from external circumstances and focus on his inner peace. He didn't allow the opinions or actions of others to define his happiness. He believed that our happiness doesn't come from external events, but from our reactions to them. In your own life, you can practice detachment by simply observing your emotions without judgment. When you feel manipulated or controlled by someone, take a step back. Instead of reacting immediately, take a deep breath and ask yourself, what is this situation really about? How can I respond in a way that aligns with my values and principles? By detaching yourself from the emotional pull of the situation, you free yourself from the manipulator's grasp. You no longer become a puppet on their strings. Instead, you are the one in control of your emotions, thoughts, and actions. In today's fast-paced world, it's all too easy to get swept away by the whirlwind of thoughts, emotions, and distractions that bombard us daily. Whether it's a manipulative comment from a colleague, a stressful situation at home, or simply the overwhelming pace of life, it's easy to lose touch with the present moment. Yet this is exactly what manipulators prey on. Their power lies in our emotional and mental distractions. Mindfulness, the practice of being fully aware of and engaged in the present moment, can be your shield against manipulation. It allows you to observe your thoughts, emotions, and reactions without being controlled by them. When you're present, you're less likely to be triggered by external factors. You can pause before reacting and choose your response thoughtfully. Instead of being carried away by fear, anger, or insecurity, mindfulness helps you return to a place of calm clarity, where your actions are driven by intention rather than impulse. Let's consider an example from the life of Tom, a middle manager in a fast-paced office environment. Tom was often the target of manipulation by his boss, who would use guilt and flattery to get him to take on additional tasks. His boss would say things like, "I'm counting on you, Tom. Everyone else is busy, but I know you can handle this." Or, "You're the only one I can rely on. You don't want to let the team down, do you?" At first, Tom felt flattered and overwhelmed, but over time, he started to feel burnt out. Tom knew he needed to change something, but the pressure from his boss kept making him say yes. It was only when Tom began practicing mindfulness that things started to shift. By focusing on the present moment, Tom was able to recognize when he was being manipulated. He started observing his emotional reactions without letting them control him. For example, instead of immediately saying yes to his boss's demands, he would take a deep breath, pause, and assess the situation. He'd ask himself, is this something I can realistically do? Is this aligned with my priorities? By staying present and mindful, Tom was able to set clearer boundaries and make decisions that were more in line with his values. He didn't fall victim to his boss's manipulative tactics, and his sense of inner peace and clarity grew stronger. Mindfulness doesn't require you to be perfect or to have an immaculate ability to control your thoughts. It's about learning to notice when you're being manipulated, when your emotions are being triggered, and when you're getting caught up in the drama. With practice, mindfulness helps you detach from the external forces that try to control you and return to a state of calm awareness. This clarity is what allows you to make better decisions, ones that protect your peace and integrity. In addition to mindfulness, another critical Stoic practice is embracing adversity as an opportunity for growth. The Stoics were not naive. They knew that life was full of challenges, difficulties, and setbacks. But instead of seeing these challenges as obstacles to happiness, they saw them as opportunities to develop resilience and strength. When faced with a manipulative situation, you can choose to see it as an opportunity to practice the Stoic virtues of patience, wisdom, and courage. Every time you resist manipulation, every time you stay true to your values, and every time you reflect on your decisions, you're growing stronger. You're becoming more resilient, more self-aware, and more aligned with your true self. Let's take the example of David, a young man who was facing immense pressure from his family to follow a career path that didn't align with his values. His family wanted him to take over the family business, but David had dreams of becoming a writer. They didn't understand why he wanted to pursue a different path, and they made it clear that they expected him to conform to their wishes. At first, David felt guilty and torn. But instead of giving in to his family's demands, David decided to take the Stoic approach. He saw the situation not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity for growth. David embraced the discomfort of speaking his truth and setting boundaries with his family. He calmly explained his passion for writing and why he felt it was the right path for him. While his family didn't immediately understand, they eventually came to respect his decision. Through this experience, David grew stronger in his ability to stand up for himself and his values. The adversity he faced didn't break him, it built him. This is the Stoic mindset in action. When faced with challenges, especially those that involve manipulation or pressure from others, instead of seeing them as threats, view them as opportunities to practice patience, clarity, and courage. Each challenge is a chance to deepen your understanding of yourself and refine your inner strength. Another Stoic practice that can be transformative in the face of manipulation is visualizing the worst-case scenario. This might sound counterintuitive, but it's a technique that helps you become less fearful and more resilient. By mentally preparing yourself for the worst, you can reduce the power that fear has over you. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. The idea is not to dwell in negativity, but to acknowledge that hardship is a natural part of life, and that you can handle whatever comes your way. Let's explore how this works. Imagine you're facing a difficult conversation with someone who's trying to manipulate you. Instead of avoiding the conversation or getting overwhelmed by the emotional weight of it, visualize the worst possible outcome. What's the worst thing that could happen if you stand up for yourself? Maybe they'll get angry, maybe they'll withdraw their support, or maybe they'll try to guilt trip you. Now imagine yourself handling that situation with grace and calm. See yourself staying composed, speaking your truth, and not allowing the situation to affect your peace. By mentally rehearsing difficult situations, you prepare yourself to handle them with resilience and clarity. This practice makes you less afraid of confrontation and manipulation because you've already faced the worst in your mind and realized that you can handle it. For example, Sarah, a young woman, had always struggled with confrontation. She dreaded the idea of upsetting others, so she often gave in to their demands. even when it wasn't in her best interest. However, one day, she decided to apply the Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum. She visualized a difficult conversation with her boss, imagining all the worst-case scenarios. By mentally preparing for the conversation, Sarah realized that even if her boss reacted negatively, she would still be okay. She would still maintain her integrity and her self-respect. When the time came to have the conversation, Sarah felt surprisingly calm. The conversation went well, and while her boss wasn't thrilled with her decision, she stood firm and didn't let manipulation take hold. By practicing premeditatio malorum, Sarah was able to face her fears and act with confidence. Let's dive into another powerful concept that can help you protect yourself from manipulation: the importance of controlling your responses, not the actions of others. Often we fall into the trap of trying to change or control the behavior of those around us. Whether it's a manipulative colleague, a demanding friend, or a family member who consistently oversteps boundaries, we think that by changing their actions, we can regain control of the situation. But the Stoics believed that we can't control others, we can only control ourselves. This is a liberating thought because it frees you from the frustration of trying to change people who are unwilling to change. When you focus on controlling your own reactions, your responses, emotions, and choices, you empower yourself. Manipulators often try to trigger a reaction from you, whether through guilt, shame, or anger. But when you recognize that their behavior is not something you can control, and you instead choose how to respond, you take the power back. Let's consider an example from the life of Emma, a woman who worked at a high-pressure job in a corporate environment. Emma had a boss, Peter, who often used guilt and manipulation to get his team to work late or take on additional tasks. He would say things like, "I'm counting on you, Emma," or "The team needs you to stay late tonight." At first, Emma tried to please Peter, always saying yes to his demands. But over time, she began to feel burnt out and resentful. One day, Emma decided to take the Stoic approach. Instead of trying to change Peter's behavior or feel guilty about his demands, she focused on how she could respond in a way that aligned with her values. The next time Peter asked her to stay late, Emma calmly replied, "I've already made plans for this evening and I won't be able to stay late. If you need assistance, I'd be happy to help out during regular working hours." By focusing on controlling her own response, Emma was able to set boundaries without feeling guilty or manipulated. This is the power of Stoic self-control. Instead of getting caught in the web of someone else's manipulation, you can choose to respond with grace and calm. You can set your own boundaries, maintain your integrity, and make decisions based on what is right for you, not what others are trying to impose on you. But how do we develop this level of self-control? It's about being proactive rather than reactive. It's about being aware of the triggers that might cause you to react impulsively. By practicing mindfulness, daily reflection, and emotional discipline, you begin to recognize the moments when you are most vulnerable to manipulation. And once you recognize these moments, you can pause, reflect, and choose how to respond. For example, let's say someone in your life tries to manipulate you by playing on your emotions. Maybe they tell you that they're upset because you haven't done something for them and you immediately feel guilty. This is a classic manipulation tactic. Instead of reacting immediately, take a deep breath and ask yourself, is this person trying to manipulate me? Recognize that their emotional reaction is their responsibility, not yours. You can choose to empathize with them without allowing their emotions to dictate your behavior. This is the Stoic approach, emotional resilience and self-control. Another important Stoic practice that can help you navigate the challenges of manipulation is focusing on what you can control. The Stoics believed that there are two types of things in life, those that are within our control and those that are not. The things within our control are our thoughts, emotions, and actions. The things that are outside our control, like the behavior of others, external events, or circumstances, are not worth stressing over. This distinction between what is within our control and what is not is crucial when it comes to dealing with manipulators. Manipulators will often try to make you feel responsible for things that are beyond your control, such as their emotional state or their actions. But by focusing only on what you can control, your own responses, actions, and thoughts, you prevent them from gaining power over you. Think about a situation where someone is trying to manipulate you by blaming you for something that wasn't your fault. Instead of getting defensive or trying to change their perspective, recognize that their behavior is beyond your control. What you can control is how you react. You can choose to remain calm, set boundaries, and assert your truth without being dragged into a conflict. This is not to say that you should ignore the feelings of others or avoid difficult conversations. Instead, it's about recognizing that you cannot change the actions or beliefs of others, but you can choose how to respond. By focusing on what you can control, you free yourself from the emotional turmoil that manipulators often try to induce. A great example of this comes from the life of James, a man who had been in a toxic friendship for years. His friend Mark would frequently make passive-aggressive comments about James's choices, trying to manipulate him into doing things his way. At first, James would try to please Mark, often sacrificing his own values and desires in the process. But over time, James realized that he couldn't control Mark's behavior, no matter how hard he tried. Instead of getting frustrated, James decided to focus on what he could control, his own boundaries and his own reactions. The next time Mark tried to manipulate him, James calmly said, "I respect your opinion, but I am choosing to make my own decisions. I won't be swayed by guilt or pressure." By focusing on what he could control, his response, James took back his power and stopped letting Mark manipulate him. This shift in mindset allowed James to break free from the toxic dynamics of the friendship and live more authentically. Ultimately, Stoicism teaches us to take responsibility for our own lives and not to give away our power to others. By focusing on what we can control, we stop giving manipulators the power to dictate our choices and actions. This is one of the most empowering aspects of Stoicism, recognizing that we are in charge of our own lives, no matter what others may try to impose on us. As we move forward, we'll explore how you can start implementing these Stoic practices in your own life so that you can live more peacefully, confidently, and authentically. Let's shift our focus to another powerful Stoic principle: embracing discomfort. One of the core tenets of Stoicism is the idea that life is full of hardships and challenges, and that these difficulties are not something to avoid or resist, but to accept as part of the human experience. The Stoics believed that by embracing discomfort and adversity, we could strengthen our character and develop resilience. When it comes to dealing with manipulators, this principle is crucial. Manipulators often try to create discomfort in your life by using guilt, shame, or emotional pressure to get you to do what they want. The Stoic response, however, is to embrace the discomfort and use it as an opportunity for growth. Imagine a situation where you're faced with a difficult conversation with a manipulative friend or colleague. They might try to make you feel guilty for not doing something they asked, or they might subtly criticize you to undermine your confidence. In these moments, the natural reaction is to avoid the discomfort by giving in to their demands or trying to placate them. But the Stoic approach is different. Instead of avoiding the discomfort, you lean into it. You acknowledge that this is a moment of growth, a chance to practice resilience and inner strength. This is where the concept of amor fati, or love of fate, comes into play. The Stoics believed that everything that happens, including the challenges and discomforts we face, is an opportunity to practice virtue. Instead of wishing things were different or trying to escape discomfort, we can choose to embrace it as part of our journey. Take the example of Ben, a man who was frequently manipulated by his boss. His boss would often make last-minute requests, piling extra work onto Ben's already full schedule. At first, Ben would try to avoid the discomfort by accepting the additional work, hoping that his boss would eventually recognize his efforts. But over time, Ben realized that by giving in to these demands, he was sacrificing his well-being and his values. He decided to take the Stoic approach. Instead of avoiding the discomfort of confrontation, he embraced it. The next time his boss made an unreasonable request, Ben calmly said, "I understand that you need help, but I already have a full workload. I won't be able to take on additional tasks right now." Ben's willingness to embrace the discomfort of setting boundaries allowed him to regain control of his time and energy. Instead of avoiding the confrontation, he used it as an opportunity to practice self-respect and assertiveness. By embracing discomfort, Ben not only broke free from his boss's manipulative tactics, but he also strengthened his ability to handle difficult situations with grace and confidence. This is a key Stoic lesson. Discomfort is not something to avoid, but something to embrace as part of the process of becoming a stronger, more resilient person. In addition to embracing discomfort, another Stoic practice that can help you navigate manipulative situations is focusing on your purpose. The Stoics were deeply committed to living a life of purpose, guided by reason, virtue, and wisdom. When you have a clear sense of purpose, it becomes easier to resist the pull of manipulation because you are anchored in your values and long-term goals. Manipulators often try to distract you from your purpose by drawing you into petty conflicts or emotional drama. But when you are clear about what you want in life and what you stand for, you can more easily recognize when someone is trying to divert you from your path. Take the example of Julia, who had a strong sense of purpose in her career. She wanted to work in a leadership role in the non-profit sector, where she could make a positive impact in her community. However, she had a colleague, Lisa, who was constantly trying to manipulate her by making snide comments or offering unsolicited advice. Lisa would often criticize Julia's career choices, suggesting that she should focus on more practical or lucrative career paths. At first, Julia was affected by Lisa's comments. She started to doubt whether she was on the right path and felt the pull to follow Lisa's advice. But then Julia remembered the Stoic principle of focusing on her purpose. She realized that her sense of purpose was not to please Lisa, but to live a life that aligned with her values and goals. Julia chose to ignore Lisa's distractions and stayed focused on her purpose. Over time, she found herself moving closer to her goal, and the influence of Lisa's manipulations faded away. This story highlights the importance of having a clear sense of purpose in your life. When you know where you're headed and what you stand for, you are less likely to be swayed by external influences or manipulative tactics. Purpose gives you direction, strength, and clarity, qualities that protect you from being manipulated. As we continue, we'll delve deeper into another Stoic concept that is invaluable when dealing with manipulators: the idea of external events being neutral. The Stoics taught that it is not the events themselves that affect us, but our interpretation of those events. This is a powerful idea because it means that we can choose how to respond to any situation, no matter how difficult or manipulative it may seem. For instance, imagine that someone close to you criticizes you publicly. Your first reaction might be to feel humiliated, angry, or defensive. But the Stoic perspective is that the event itself, the criticism, is neutral. It's your reaction to it that causes the emotional turmoil. When you can detach yourself from the emotional reaction, you have the power to choose how to respond. You can either accept the criticism calmly, learn from it, or decide that it's not worth your attention. This principle can be especially helpful in manipulative situations. Manipulators often rely on emotional triggers to control you. They might criticize, belittle, or use guilt to make you react emotionally. But if you can adopt the Stoic mindset that external events are neutral, you can avoid being emotionally hijacked. You can observe the situation objectively, decide how you want to respond, and maintain your composure. One great example of this comes from the life of Marcus Aurelius, who, despite being the emperor of Rome, faced constant challenges, both personal and political. He was often criticized by his enemies and faced betrayal from those closest to him. But Marcus didn't allow these external events to control him. Instead, he saw them as neutral events, opportunities to practice virtue and wisdom. His ability to detach from emotional reactions and focus on what was within his control helped him lead the Roman Empire with grace and effectiveness. This is the power of Stoic resiliency. By seeing external events as neutral and choosing your response, you take away the manipulator's power to control your emotions and actions. You become unshakable no matter what life throws your way. As we explore deeper into Stoicism, it's essential to look at the idea of resilience through acceptance of fate, a principle known as fate is our ally. Life is unpredictable. Events can change on a dime, and people can act in ways that confuse or frustrate us. Manipulators, in particular, often thrive on our inability to accept what is beyond our control. They want to push our buttons, make us react impulsively, and create chaos. But the Stoic way is different. It's about accepting that life's circumstances are outside our control, and instead of fighting against them, we embrace them as opportunities for growth. This doesn't mean giving up or being passive in the face of adversity. Stoicism encourages us to take action where we can, but to accept those things that we cannot change. It's about acknowledging that external events, such as a manipulative person's behavior, are not personal attacks, but rather challenges to our ability to maintain inner peace. The core idea here is amor fati, which translates to love of fate. It means embracing all that happens, good or bad, because we realize it's part of the larger picture of life. There's no room for victimhood or resentment, only the freedom to navigate through each challenge with equanimity. For example, consider Sarah, who faced a challenging situation at work. She had a colleague, Greg, who often manipulated situations to make himself look better. Greg would take credit for her work, downplay her ideas in meetings, and subtly undermine her confidence. At first, Sarah was devastated. She wanted to confront Greg, expose his manipulations, and retaliate. But then, after practicing Stoic principles of detachment and acceptance, Sarah recognized that Greg's actions were out of her control. Rather than getting upset, she decided to focus on what she could control: her own actions, her own work, and her response. She shifted her perspective, accepting that Greg's behavior was part of her experience, but not letting it define her. Sarah embraced the discomfort that came with the situation, choosing instead to improve her work and skills, to remain calm and composed, and to focus on her own growth. Over time, Sarah realized that Greg's manipulations no longer had the power to affect her. By accepting her fate and focusing on her own responses, Sarah developed resilience and inner peace. This practice of embracing fate is a powerful antidote to manipulation. When you stop resisting life's challenges and start accepting them as part of your journey, you free yourself from the emotional turmoil that manipulators often try to induce. You are no longer dependent on how others behave, and this gives you immense personal power. The Stoics also believed in virtue as the highest good, something to which we must always strive, regardless of external circumstances. Virtue in Stoicism is defined by traits such as wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control. When you make virtue the guiding principle in your life, external manipulation becomes powerless. You will no longer feel the need to please others, seek validation, or fall into destructive cycles. Let's take the story of John, who worked in a competitive, fast-paced industry. where manipulation was common. His boss would often ask for favors, such as taking on additional projects without appropriate compensation, all while promising future rewards that never materialized. John began to feel trapped, but instead of continuing to succumb to the manipulation, he decided to focus on his personal virtue, especially justice and self-respect. He set clear boundaries with his boss and took charge of his own career path. Rather than constantly pleasing others, John chose to follow his own values. His decisions were now based on what was just and aligned with his integrity. When his boss continued with manipulative tactics, John didn't retaliate. Instead, he calmly communicated his limits and focused on finding opportunities that better aligned with his values. By focusing on virtue, John no longer felt like a victim. His internal compass was no longer influenced by others' actions, and he gained a sense of control over his life. So, how can you implement this principle of virtue into your life, especially when dealing with manipulators? It starts with alignment with your values. In every situation, whether dealing with a manipulative person, a tough decision, or a challenging circumstance, ask yourself, what is the virtuous thing to do here? Will this action align with my values, or will it compromise my integrity? In situations where manipulators attempt to push you into decisions that don't align with your values, simply pause and reflect on the bigger picture. Ask yourself, what is the right course of action regardless of external pressures? This clarity allows you to remain unmoved, grounded in your own integrity, and free from the influence of manipulative tactics. Now let's examine the importance of self-discipline in Stoicism. This is a foundational principle that allows you to stay strong in the face of external challenges, particularly when it comes to resisting manipulation. Self-discipline is the ability to stay focused on what truly matters, to resist distractions, and to make decisions based on reason rather than impulse. Manipulators often exploit our lack of self-discipline, drawing us into emotional drama or urging us to make decisions quickly without considering the long-term consequences. But when you cultivate self-discipline, you create a solid foundation from which to respond thoughtfully and strategically. Consider Anna, who had been manipulated into unhealthy relationships in the past. She would often compromise her values, going along with things that didn't align with her beliefs, just to keep the peace. But Anna decided she wanted to change. She committed to strengthening her self-discipline, especially in how she reacted to other people's influence. The next time someone tried to manipulate her, she paused. She didn't immediately say yes or agree to anything. Instead, she took a moment to consider the situation, ask herself if it aligned with her values, and then made the decision that was right for her. Through this practice, Anna gradually built her self-discipline. She didn't give in to impulsive reactions or external pressure. Over time, she gained more confidence in her ability to make decisions that aligned with her true self, and she became less susceptible to manipulation. This ability to stay focused, disciplined, and aligned with her values became one of her greatest strengths. Self-discipline is a lifelong practice. It's about creating habits that allow you to stay true to your values, even when the world around you is chaotic. And when you cultivate this self-discipline, you develop the strength to resist the influence of others, including manipulators. Let's explore the power of silence and strategic withdrawal, which can be incredibly effective when dealing with manipulators. Stoicism teaches us that at times the best response to manipulation is not engagement, but detachment. Silence, when used wisely, can strip away the manipulator's leverage and leave them without the control they typically crave. Manipulators thrive on emotional reactions. They often provoke, guilt-trip, or push boundaries, hoping for an outburst or a decision made in haste. But when you remain silent, when you don't provide them with the emotional feedback they're seeking, they lose the ability to manipulate. The Stoics believed that we should respond to external stimuli thoughtfully, not react impulsively. In doing so, we maintain control over ourselves and reduce the chances of being manipulated. Take the example of Mark, a middle manager in a large company who was always at the mercy of his superior, Ryan. Ryan would frequently use passive-aggressive comments to guilt Mark into taking on extra work, implying that Mark wasn't a team player if he didn't comply. Initially, Mark tried to explain himself, defending his position and feeling guilty. This only emboldened Ryan to push him harder. But Mark, after learning about the power of silence, decided to change his approach. The next time Ryan made a manipulative remark, Mark didn't respond immediately. He didn't engage or defend himself. Instead, he calmly responded, "I understand your perspective," and walked away without offering further commentary. This simple shift in behavior caught Ryan off guard. Over time, Ryan stopped trying to manipulate Mark as he realized that his tactics no longer worked. Mark's silence became a form of power, a form of self-control that neutralized Ryan's attempts at manipulation. Silence isn't about avoiding the situation or running away from confrontation. It's about refusing to give the manipulator what they want, your emotional reaction, your justification, or your compliance. When you practice silence strategically, you send a clear message that you are no longer vulnerable to their tactics. You take back the power to decide how you engage with them. This concept of strategic withdrawal can also be applied in your personal life. Manipulative individuals, whether they are friends, family members, or co-workers, often rely on your emotional energy to get what they want. By stepping back and allowing space between you and them, you remove their ability to exert control over your actions or decisions. Sometimes, simply stepping away from a toxic interaction is the most powerful move you can make. While silence can be a powerful tool, it's important to remember that it must be used intentionally. It's not about shutting down communication altogether, but about choosing when to speak and when to remain quiet. Silence gives you time to reflect, to process your emotions, and to think before reacting. It allows you to create space for wisdom and clarity rather than impulsivity and emotional reactivity. As you build your capacity for silence, it becomes easier to disengage from the manipulative tactics of others. You begin to trust your own judgment and resist the pressure to react. And over time, this ability to choose silence strategically becomes one of your most effective tools for maintaining control over your life and your interactions with others. Let's now move on to the role of empathy in Stoicism. Many people believe that empathy means giving in to others' demands or becoming emotionally involved in their struggles. But in Stoicism, empathy is about understanding others without losing yourself in their emotions. It's about recognizing their humanity while also maintaining your own boundaries. Manipulators often use your empathy against you, playing on your compassion and desire to help. They may present themselves as victims, drawing on your empathy to get you to make decisions that are not in your best interest. But Stoicism teaches us that true empathy comes from understanding others without allowing their emotions to control ours. Imagine a situation where a friend asks for a favor that stretches your time and energy thin. They may express how desperate they are, how much they need your help. Your natural instinct may be to give in, to help them without considering your own well-being. However, the Stoic approach is to practice empathy without attachment. Empathy allows you to recognize their struggle, but it doesn't mean you sacrifice your own needs or values in the process. Take the story of Laura, a woman who had a close friend, Sarah, who frequently asked for her help. Sarah's requests were often urgent, and when Laura didn't comply, Sarah would accuse her of not caring enough. For a while, Laura gave in to these demands, ignoring her own needs to help Sarah. But Laura realized that by constantly giving in, she wasn't actually helping Sarah in a healthy way. She was enabling Sarah's manipulative behavior. Instead of emotionally reacting to Sarah's demands, Laura practiced Stoic empathy. She acknowledged Sarah's struggles, but she also set clear boundaries. I understand that you're going through a tough time, and I care about you. But I cannot help you with this right now because I have my own commitments that need my attention. Laura would say. This response was empathetic, but firm. It respected Sarah's feelings without sacrificing Laura's own well-being. Through this practice, Laura maintained her empathy without allowing it to be used against her. Empathy doesn't mean overextending yourself or constantly giving in to the emotional demands of others. It means understanding their experience but choosing to respond from a place of balance and self-respect. When you master this type of empathetic response, you protect yourself from emotional manipulation while still showing compassion for others. Let's also talk about the power of resilience and persistence. Stoicism teaches us to focus on building inner strength, not just in moments of crisis, but in every aspect of life. Resilience is about withstanding adversity, whether that adversity comes in the form of manipulative individuals, difficult circumstances, or personal setbacks. It's about developing the inner fortitude to continue pursuing your goals, even when faced with obstacles. Manipulators often seek to break your resilience. They want to see you falter, give up, or doubt yourself. But when you cultivate the strength to stay the course, regardless of their tactics, you become unshakable. Your persistence in following your own values and purpose, despite external pressures, is your greatest defense against manipulation. Consider the story of Jake, a young entrepreneur who faced repeated manipulation from investors who sought to control his company. They would offer large sums of money but with strings attached, demands that would compromise Jake's integrity and vision for the company. At first, Jake felt pressure to accept their offers, but over time, he recognized that their manipulations were an attempt to control him and undermine his long-term goals. Rather than giving in, Jake focused on his resilience. He rejected the manipulative offers and instead sought out investors who aligned with his vision. He continued to build his company on his own terms, trusting that persistence and resilience would eventually lead to success. Jake's ability to stay true to his values despite the pressure allowed him to navigate the manipulative tactics and build a business that was aligned with his principles. The key takeaway from Stoicism here is that resilience is not about avoiding difficulty. It's about embracing challenges with the knowledge that they can help you grow. By practicing resilience, you learn to withstand manipulation and remain steadfast in your pursuit of what truly matters. As we continue to unpack Stoicism and how it can protect you from manipulation, let's explore the role of wisdom in decision-making. Stoics believed that wisdom was the cornerstone of virtue. Wisdom allows us to distinguish between what is worth pursuing and what is merely a distraction. It helps us navigate complex situations with clarity and, more importantly, it shields us from the manipulative tactics of others. Manipulators often use confusion or urgency to force us into decisions. They may create a sense of pressure, hoping we'll act quickly and impulsively without considering the consequences. But when you practice Stoic wisdom, you learn to resist this pressure. You take the time to evaluate the situation with reason, detaching from emotional impulses and focusing on what aligns with your long-term goals and values. For instance, imagine a scenario where a manipulative friend pressures you into lending them money, promising to pay it back soon. They might tell you they're in a tough spot, highlighting your compassion for their situation. Your first instinct might be to say yes, but this is where Stoic wisdom comes into play. Instead of reacting emotionally or feeling guilty, you pause and evaluate the situation from a place of reason. What is the true impact of lending them money? Will they repay you as promised, or will you be enabling their behavior? How will this decision affect your relationship with them in the long term? Stoicism encourages you to ask these questions and weigh the options carefully. You are not making a decision based on guilt or pressure. You are making it based on wisdom and understanding of what is truly beneficial for both you and your friend. Take the example of Tom, a successful business owner who had a close relationship with a former colleague, Pete. Pete often tried to manipulate Tom by creating a sense of urgency, asking for favors, or trying to make Tom feel guilty for not helping him. One day, Pete asked Tom for a substantial loan to cover a business expense, promising that he would pay it back within a month. At first, Tom felt the familiar pressure to help out, but instead of acting impulsively, he paused and reflected. Tom remembered the times when Pete had failed to deliver on promises and how he had never returned previous favors. After careful consideration, Tom decided to politely decline, citing his own financial commitments and explaining that he didn't lend money to friends without a clear plan for repayment. Pete was upset, but Tom stuck to his decision. By exercising wisdom and evaluating the situation with clarity, Tom avoided falling into Pete's manipulative tactics. This example highlights how wisdom in decision-making is key to avoiding manipulation. When you step back, remove the emotional triggers, and evaluate situations thoughtfully, you empower yourself to make decisions that are true to your values and protect your well-being. Another crucial aspect of Stoicism is the ability to control expectations. Manipulators often work by creating unrealistic expectations, whether it's about what you can do for them or how quickly you should meet their demands. The Stoics understood that expectations often lead to disappointment and frustration, especially when they're based on things outside our control. Instead, they practiced the art of adjusting their expectations to reality, ensuring that they were always prepared for whatever came their way. Let's take the story of Alice, a project manager at a large corporation. Alice's team was often pressured by upper management to meet deadlines that were unrealistic and outside of their control. At first, Alice tried to meet these demands, but the constant pressure left her feeling burnt out and resentful. She realized that she had been setting her expectations based on what management wanted, not what was actually feasible. By shifting her mindset and adjusting her expectations to match reality, Alice was able to better manage her team's workload. She communicated more effectively with upper management, setting realistic goals and timelines. Instead of accepting the pressure to meet impossible demands, Alice focused on what was achievable, and this helped her team stay motivated and productive. Adjusting your expectations doesn't mean lowering your standards or giving up on your goals. It means recognizing the difference between what you can control and what you cannot, and setting realistic expectations accordingly. By practicing this Stoic principle, you stop giving manipulators the chance to control your actions with their unrealistic demands. When you stop expecting others to behave in ways that are outside your control, you reduce the power manipulators have over you. You can focus on setting healthy boundaries and making decisions that align with your values, rather than reacting to someone else's expectations. Let's also discuss the role of self-awareness in Stoic philosophy. Self-awareness is at the heart of emotional intelligence, and it is essential for recognizing manipulation before it takes hold. Manipulators rely on your inability to recognize your own emotional triggers and weaknesses. They know that if they can push the right buttons, they can get you to react in ways that serve their interests. But when you practice self-awareness, you become more attuned to your emotional state and can recognize when you are being manipulated. Self-awareness is about understanding your own emotions, thoughts, and motivations. It's about knowing what makes you vulnerable and being proactive in managing those vulnerabilities. Stoicism teaches us that emotional responses are not something to be ashamed of, but something to observe, understand, and learn from. The more you know yourself, the less likely you are to fall prey to manipulative tactics. Take the example of Leah, who was often manipulated by her colleague Steve, who played on her insecurities. Steve would frequently praise her work, but would also drop subtle comments that made Leah feel like she wasn't doing enough. He would imply that others were performing better and that she needed to do more to keep up. Leah initially felt guilty and pressured to meet his demands, but over time, she began practicing self-awareness. Leah started to notice that Steve's comments made her feel insecure and that her responses were driven by a fear of not being good enough. Once she recognized this, Leah took a step back. She realized that Steve was using her insecurities to manipulate her into doing more work. With this awareness, Leah was able to assert herself, setting boundaries and no longer giving in to Steve's tactics. She recognized that her feelings of inadequacy were a result of her own fears and not necessarily a reflection of reality. Self-awareness is a powerful tool in resisting manipulation. When you know what triggers you emotionally, you can prevent manipulators from exploiting those weaknesses. By practicing self-awareness, you develop the clarity to make decisions based on reason rather than emotion, allowing you to maintain your peace of mind and protect your boundaries. As we continue, it's important to remember that the Stoic approach to life is not just about resisting manipulation. It's about building a life of virtue, wisdom, and self-control, so that you are not swayed by external forces. Stoicism teaches us that our true power lies not in trying to control the world around us, but in controlling how we respond to the world. By practicing the principles of Stoicism, such as emotional control, wisdom, resilience, and self-awareness, you create a foundation of inner strength that allows you to navigate life's challenges with grace and clarity. Manipulators may try to disrupt your peace, but when you live with intention and purpose, they cannot control you. Your peace of mind and inner strength will always be your greatest defense. Let's take a deeper dive into the concept of personal accountability. The Stoics believe that true freedom comes from taking full responsibility for our actions, thoughts, and reactions. By embracing personal accountability, we not only take ownership of our own life, but we also free ourselves from the influence of others, especially manipulators. Manipulators often rely on shifting blame and making us feel responsible for their behavior. They may guilt trip us, making us feel that we owe them something or that we are the cause of their suffering. But Stoicism teaches us that we are responsible for our own actions and emotions. When we take full responsibility for our own lives, we stop giving others the power to control us. Let's consider the example of Peter, a man who had been in a long-standing friendship with Tim. Over time, Tim began to manipulate Peter by making him feel responsible for his own unhappiness. Tim would often complain about his life, saying things like, "I can't believe I'm stuck in this situation. You have no idea how hard my life is, and you're doing so well. It must be nice not to have to worry about anything." Peter felt guilty for Tim's struggles and tried to fix things for him, taking on more responsibility than he could handle. However, after reflecting on Stoic principles, Peter realized that he had been taking on too much responsibility for Tim's emotions. Peter was not responsible for Tim's life or his happiness. Tim was. Peter had allowed himself to be manipulated by Tim's emotional manipulation. By shifting his mindset and practicing personal accountability, Peter was able to recognize that Tim's choices were his own to make, and Peter was no longer obligated to carry the burden of Tim's struggles. By practicing personal accountability, Peter stopped feeling responsible for Tim's emotional state. He could still empathize with Tim, but he no longer allowed Tim's emotional manipulation to control his actions. Personal accountability means recognizing that you cannot control the actions or emotions of others, but you can control your own reactions, choices, and boundaries. Taking responsibility for your life allows you to break free from the manipulation of others. It empowers you to make decisions based on your own values, not based on someone else's expectations or emotional manipulation. It also gives you the freedom to set boundaries and protect your well-being without feeling guilty or responsible for others' actions. Now let's talk about the importance of patience in the face of manipulation. Manipulators often thrive on our impulsive reactions. They may use guilt, anger, or confusion to push us into making hasty decisions. But patience, a key Stoic virtue, is one of the best tools you have for resisting manipulation. By practicing patience, you create the space to reflect, to consider your options, and to choose the best course of action, rather than reacting out of fear or pressure. Consider the story of Ava, a woman who had been in a toxic romantic relationship for years. Her partner would often use emotional manipulation to get what he wanted, guilt-tripping Eva into doing things she wasn't comfortable with. For example, he would say, "If you really loved me, you would do this for me," or "You're the only one who understands me, and I can't do this without you." Initially, Eva would react impulsively, feeling overwhelmed by the emotional pressure. But after learning about Stoicism, Eva realized that patience was the key to breaking free from the cycle of manipulation. Eva began practicing patience. Instead of reacting immediately to her partner's demands, she would pause and reflect on what was really being asked of her. She asked herself, "Is this request aligned with my values? Is it something I am comfortable with?" By allowing herself to reflect before responding, Eva gained clarity and was able to set healthier boundaries with her partner. Over time, this practice of patience helped Eva regain control of her life and stop allowing her partner to manipulate her emotions. Patience doesn't mean passivity, it means creating space between stimulus and response. Instead of immediately reacting to someone else's emotional manipulation, you choose to pause, reflect, and respond thoughtfully. This practice of patience helps you avoid making decisions based on fear or guilt, which are often used by manipulators to get their way. In addition to patience, let's explore the power of self-respect. The Stoics believed that self-respect was fundamental to living a virtuous life. When you respect yourself, you are less likely to allow others to manipulate you because you recognize your own worth and refuse to let anyone treat you as less than you deserve. Self-respect means acknowledging your values, your boundaries, and your needs, and not compromising them for the sake of others. Take the example of Nadia, a successful professional who was often manipulated by her co-workers. They would regularly ask her to cover for them, take on extra work, or make personal sacrifices for the benefit of the team. Nadia felt guilty saying no, even though she was overwhelmed. But over time, Nadia realized that she was compromising her self-respect by constantly sacrificing her own needs for the sake of others. She decided to take a stand and practice self-respect. Nadia began saying no to unreasonable requests, even if it meant disappointing others. She learned to prioritize her own well-being, recognizing that taking care of herself allowed her to be more effective at work and in her personal life. By practicing self-respect, Nadia stopped being manipulated by guilt and began making decisions that aligned with her values and goals. Self-respect is the foundation of all healthy relationships, including the one you have with yourself. When you value yourself, you stop allowing others to take advantage of you. You set clear boundaries, make decisions based on your principles, and refuse to accept treatment that doesn't align with your worth. In doing so, you protect yourself from manipulation and empower yourself to live authentically. Now let's discuss how to cultivate emotional resilience, another key Stoic practice. Emotional resilience is the ability to face challenges, setbacks, and manipulative tactics without being emotionally overwhelmed. Manipulators often seek to exploit your emotional vulnerabilities. They try to trigger strong emotional reactions to destabilize you and make you more pliable. But when you build emotional resilience, you strengthen your ability to stay calm, composed, and focused, no matter what external pressures you face. Let's think about Alex, who worked in a high-stress environment where manipulation was common. His co-workers would often use underhanded tactics to get ahead, whether it was taking credit for his work or trying to discredit him in front of others. At first, Alex would react with frustration, anger, or self-doubt. But over time, he realized that his emotional reactions were only giving his co-workers more control over him. Alex decided to focus on building his emotional resilience. He practiced mindfulness, reflection, and Stoic exercises to strengthen his emotional responses. When his co-workers tried to manipulate him, Alex remained calm and composed, focusing on the bigger picture and his long-term goals. He no longer allowed their actions to trigger his emotional responses. Instead, he responded thoughtfully, using his emotional resilience to protect his peace. Emotional resilience allows you to remain focused on what matters most, even when you're faced with manipulation or emotional provocation. By cultivating resilience, you create a strong foundation for your well-being and stop allowing external forces to disrupt your inner peace. Now that we've discussed a variety of Stoic practices that can help you resist manipulation and live a life of greater clarity and inner peace, let's examine how you can implement these principles on a daily basis. Stoicism isn't just a philosophy to be studied or discussed, it's meant to be lived. The true power of Stoic thought comes when you apply its lessons consistently to your everyday life, especially in your interactions with others. One of the most fundamental Stoic practices is beginning each day with intention. The Stoics believe that it's not just the big moments of life that define us, but the small choices we make throughout the day. This is why every morning Marcus Aurelius would remind himself of his goals and values. He would reflect on the fact that the day ahead would bring challenges, difficult people, and unpredictable events, but he would approach them with composure, reason, and virtue. You can begin each day with the same mindset. Before you start your day, take a moment to set your intentions. Reflect on your goals for the day and think about the possible challenges or manipulative behaviors you might face. Remind yourself of your Stoic values, your commitment to integrity, wisdom, and emotional resilience. This brief morning ritual sets the tone for the day and helps you approach whatever comes your way with a calm and thoughtful mindset. For example, you might wake up and decide that no matter what pressures or manipulative tactics others use, you will stay grounded in your own sense of self-worth. You might affirm that no one will control your emotions or decisions, and that you will focus on making decisions aligned with your values. This intention-setting practice can be a game changer, helping you stay focused on what truly matters, even when others try to pull you into emotional turmoil. Another Stoic practice that can be transformative is daily reflection. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to review your actions, thoughts, and interactions. This is a practice known as the evening review, and it was a key part of Marcus Aurelius's routine. During this time, you can ask yourself questions like, how did I handle challenging situations today? Did I remain composed, or did I react impulsively? Did I allow anyone to manipulate me, or did I stand firm in my boundaries? What decisions did I make that were aligned with my values? What decisions can I improve upon tomorrow? Did I practice empathy and understanding without compromising my self-respect? This self-reflection helps you grow as a person by recognizing areas where you succeeded and areas where you can improve. It's a way to assess your behavior without judgment, to learn from your mistakes, and to commit to becoming a better version of yourself each day. In addition to reflection, journaling is another powerful tool for applying Stoic principles to your life. Journaling gives you the space to explore your emotions, thoughts, and responses to daily events. It helps you clarify your values and articulate your goals. Most importantly, journaling allows you to track your progress over time so you can see how far you've come in cultivating emotional resilience, wisdom, and self-control. For instance, after a particularly challenging encounter with a manipulative person, you might journal about how you felt during the situation, how you responded, and how you wish you could have reacted differently. This practice helps you develop self-awareness and can guide you toward better responses in the future. It also allows you to acknowledge when you've been successful in applying Stoic principles, reinforcing your growth and progress. Another way to implement Stoicism in your daily life is by practicing gratitude, even in the face of manipulation. Gratitude is one of the most powerful tools in the Stoic toolbox. The more you focus on what you are grateful for, the less power manipulation has over you. Manipulators often try to take away your sense of peace by making you focus on what you don't have or what you're missing out on. But by practicing gratitude, you shift your attention to the abundance already present in your life. Every night, take a few moments to reflect on the things you are grateful for, whether they are big or small. You might be grateful for your health, your family, your work, or simply the fact that you have the ability to choose how to respond to challenging situations. Gratitude helps to cultivate a sense of inner peace, making you less susceptible to external manipulation. It reminds you that you are already enough and that your worth is not dependent on the approval or behavior of others. Setting healthy boundaries is also a key Stoic practice that you can implement every day. As we've discussed, manipulators thrive when you allow them to cross your boundaries, but by consistently setting and maintaining clear boundaries, you protect your peace and your integrity. This doesn't mean being rude or unkind, it simply means being clear about your limits and respecting your own needs. For example, if someone asks you to take on additional work that you don't have the time or energy for, you can assertively say, "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not able to take on more work at the moment." Setting boundaries like this may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're not used to saying no. But over time, it becomes easier, and you'll find that your relationships improve because they are based on mutual respect rather than manipulation. Let's also talk about the importance of detachment, the Stoic ability to remain objective and not become emotionally entangled in situations that are beyond your control. Detachment doesn't mean shutting down emotionally, it means recognizing that your peace of mind is not dependent on external events or the behavior of others. When you practice detachment, you're able to observe a situation without becoming emotionally involved in it. You can recognize manipulation without reacting emotionally to it. Instead of getting frustrated or angry, you choose to stay calm and composed, focusing on what you can control. This is a powerful skill to develop, especially when you're dealing with difficult or manipulative individuals. One way to practice detachment is by reminding yourself that you can only control your own reactions, not the actions of others. When you feel manipulated, pause and take a step back. Ask yourself, how am I choosing to respond to this situation? By creating this space between stimulus and response, you prevent yourself from being controlled by someone else's actions. Finally, acceptance is a key Stoic practice that can help you navigate manipulation. The Stoics believed that we cannot change the world around us, but we can change how we respond to it. This means accepting that life will always present challenges, including manipulative people, but choosing to meet those challenges with resilience and calmness. When you accept that manipulation is part of life and that you cannot control others, you free yourself from the frustration and emotional turmoil that often comes with trying to change people. Acceptance allows you to focus on what you can control, your thoughts, your actions, and your mindset. It is through this acceptance that you can find peace, even in difficult circumstances. Hey, thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful and want more content on personal growth, Stoic philosophy, and living with purpose, make sure to hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Just click the button and let's keep growing together. See you in the next video.